tonight it's all about the Terrence Higgins Trust Life Really Changed campaign, which many of you may have seen around all around on billboards and on the sides of buses and things. A campaign which I'm really honoured to have chosen to be one of the few to be part of. I love the campaign because the Life Really Changed campaign it's not just about targeting the stigma around the virus directly, as in you can't pass it on, which was brilliant at the time. And obviously there was a big campaign about PrEP, which was also an amazing one, which empowers negative people to stay negative. But this time, this campaign is actually about showing that even though stigma still exists, even if you are positive, you can still go on and live a really normal life. You're unaffected by the virus, and actually more than normal. A lot of people who are on this campaign have gone above and beyond. And tonight we're going to be listening to James Bushe, who's also he's part of the campaign, and his remarkable story. And we have Florence, who she's part of the Terrence Higgins, the Positive Voices. I nearly forgot what it was then, and she's going to be talking to you a little bit later. So yeah, about me, I basically came out 6 months ago now about my status. I'd been diagnosed for 10 years, and I was completely in the closet about my status. But actually, I watched It's a Sin, the amazing Channel 4 series by Russell T Davies, and that inspired me to become a little bit more public about my status. And it's been amazing. I realized I was holding this secret as something, even though I'd managed to live with the virus and have a successful life, I would say, or a normal life. I feel like keeping this secret was something that I didn't want to. It was almost like a homophobic narrative that I was kind of holding. And in order to me to be a free, happy gay man, I feel like there was something that I wanted to open up about. And my life has changed since I told people about my status. But I'm sure we can talk more about that later. A couple of things with housekeeping. We've asked lots of you have asked questions, so that's amazing, and we'll try and address these throughout the evening. So yeah, with no further ado, on to our first guest, James. We're going to watch a little video about James's story, but just a little bit about him. He was diagnosed in 2014 with HIV, and was at the time devastated to learn that he could not fulfill his boyhood dream of becoming a commercial airline pilot. So instead of just giving up, he fought to change the rules, and he became the first HIV positive person in Europe to train as an airline pilot. He now flies for Logan Air. And here we are, using a flight simulator. We're going to travel into James's memory to tell his story and explore his complex relationship with the cockpit.
It's a place that you go to where there's just you, the aeroplane, and the sky, really. No matter what your concerns, worries, just leave them at the gate, you know? The only thing I could think about was, this is all you've ever wanted to do. You cannot let this go. I think when I first stepped foot into a flight deck when I was a kid, it looked so out of this world. It was such a distant dream.
In case of unforeseen circumstances, it can take immediate decisions to alter our speed or direction.
I've always been the kid that was more excited about the actual process of going through the airport and being on an aeroplane than, you know, the actual holiday itself. Always fighting for the window seat, always dinging the call bell for the flight attendant to see if I could go to the flight deck. I was on a flight back from Tenerife. As usual, I'd managed to wangle a trip up to the flight deck. I was sat in the jump seat of the 757, just in awe of the machine, of them, and it was then that I knew that this was all I wanted to do. This is where it all began. Halfway down that runway to the left-hand side, as you exit on taxiway Mike, is where my old flying school used to be. I kind of have a cinema reel that's flicking through my head of all the times that I've taken off on this runway. I went from this being this kind of futuristic and unachievable sci-fi goal to thinking, oh, actually, you know what, yeah, this could be for me, to, oh, wow, this is for me and I can do this. The more time you spend in the flight deck, it starts to become this sort of area of mastery, really. You start to become one with the machine, is what a lot of experienced guys say. You're sort of expecting this sort of music, if you like, to flow. So the diagnosis came in 2014, and I thought that I was never going to fly again because I'm HIV positive. I gave myself an incredibly hard time. I was worried about what friends might think. Friends of a time and of a generation that lived through the Don't Die of Ignorance campaign of the 80s.
There is now a danger that has become a threat to us all. It is a deadly disease and there is no known cure. So far it's been confined to small groups, but it's spreading. So protect yourself and read this leaflet when it arrives.
I thought that I was this sort of walking grenade, or just, I was very conscious of the fear people might have of me. I had been so diligent, and every single decision that I made, it was all with the end goal of becoming a pilot in mind, The regulations essentially said that if you were someone that was living with HIV that wanted to become a pilot, you couldn't. The thinking was that somebody living with HIV might become unwell during flight. That's why I couldn't get the medical. I was ashamed, embarrassed, and thought, you know what, the easiest thing here is to just walk away. all of the evidence, all of the medical evidence that was used to justify the authorities' position on HIV at the time was outdated, and it didn't know or didn't recognise that somebody on successful treatment had the virus suppressed in their body, so you weren't going to become incapacitated at any point in time. There was blatant discrimination based on somebody's HIV status, and that didn't make any sense to me, and it needed to be challenged. You must present all of these to us. A neuropsychologist, a knot in my stomach. I mean, why would you waste your time? A psychiatric assessment. Maybe this is a complete waste of time. Why is it I'm having to do this? Everything was an uphill battle, and every piece of communication that I seemed to get back from anyone was always another reason why it couldn't happen. I knew that actually I need some help here. I can't do this on my own. So it started with getting the media involved and how can we raise the profile of this story. I wasn't comfortable speaking as me. I used the pseudonym of Pilot Anthony, a name that, hopefully people wouldn't associate with me at all. I was doing TV for the BBC, STV, radio, and my voice was altered. I sounded like a Dalek.
Obviously, I was very upset because at this point it was quite a definitive no.
That media attention at that point managed to generate a hell of a lot of support for the case, and on the back of that, we managed to get politicians involved, and ultimately the First Minister speaking in the Scottish Parliament to say that actually this rule is wrong.
And we should all continue to work to eradicate the stigma around the virus.
I always thought that if we keep pushing and pushing and pushing, this has to happen. And with the political support, with the media attention at that time, we managed to get the rules changed.
It's not just a matter of putting on a uniform and flying off around the world. Long before they'll let you near the real thing, there's the simulator. It's just an elaborate box firmly fixed to the ground.
I stepped foot into the flight deck to start training, and it was a little bit sad in a way because it was familiar, but it was kind of, a distant memory familiar. I almost knew that everything else from then on was going to be done in the context of that challenge that had happened, and I would never have those sort of pure childhood experiences again. Stepping foot back into the flight deck after that break, I started to reflect internally more than anything on why I'd used Pilot Anthony. I was back to that point of being ashamed again. What was it about the diagnosis, about me, that made me feel that I couldn't do this as myself? I think my own perceptions and prejudices that I had about HIV before I started this journey were as wrong as the ones that I seek to challenge today. When I decided to, come out, for want of a better word, it was the point of it's okay to be HIV positive and be a pilot. Because everything in the world up until that point had told me that it wasn't. And I wanted to tell everybody and tell myself that it was. Flying to me has always in a way felt very therapeutic. It's actually really nice to just escape to that world, I guess.
Wow. Oh, thank you, George. Wow, that was amazing. That was a really good. Thank you, James. Thanks for everything.
you.
Like, I mean, I basically got a bit emotional watching that because it can resonate. I resonate with so much of what you said, and you know, it's not just about. It wasn't just about actually getting the rules changed, but it was that thing about doing it undercover. And I suppose that's what I had been doing. You know, I'd kind of educated myself about HIV and realized that I had nothing to worry about and in control of my own medication, but I still was keeping it a secret. And I mean, you achieved so much without actually even revealing your identity. But how did you feel when you actually?
Me, yeah, when I came out last year, and you said it in the introduction, I think for so long I had put upon myself all of this kind of internalized stigma, really, because that's what it was. It was self-stigma and internalized homophobia as well. And those two combined was what prevented me from telling that story as me in the beginning. And that day, 13th of January last year, was probably the most empowering day of my entire life, because immediately I just felt like I could be me, and I could be 100% me. There were no secrets. There was nothing to hide. And actually, more than that, it was an opportunity to say to anybody else living with HIV who wanted to become a pilot, you can do this now. You can do this too.
Yeah.
To anybody else living with HIV facing discrimination of any kind, you can challenge it, and it is possible to do that, you know?
Yeah, I think it's really empowering to put a face to the name as well, James. Like, it's okay being Pilot. What did you call yourself? Pilot Anthony. Pilot Anthony. But yeah. He's just a Dalek, as you said, and you know, it's not as relatable until they see the person behind that. And I think it's really amazing that you were able to finally do that. And you know, certainly that's exactly what this campaign's about, isn't it? It's about putting a face to the name and also the achievement behind that as well.
Absolutely, definitely. And you know, I'm so proud to be a part of the campaign as a whole, and hopefully it gives people who haven't got that place, because it took me 6 years to get to that point of feeling confident enough and knowing that I had the big enough support network around me to come out and to be confident that actually no matter what the reaction, I'll be okay. And I just hope that through this campaign we can prove to others living with HIV that they can be okay as well.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah. So, well, we've got a few minutes now. A few people have asked some questions ahead of today's session, and I guess one of the ones that I thought was really, really interesting was, like you got the rules changed. That's great, rules change. But how do you think has anything changed for you in terms of the industry and the culture around that? Since coming out, and have you noticed anything different? Or
yeah, I think so. Actually, I think with regard to HIV and flying specifically, obviously there's still a little bit of work to do. It was in the film there that I can only fly with another pilot.
That's
but actually we're literally only a few months away from that changing. And that in itself has been representative of changing culture within our authority. And, the UK has gone from being quite far behind in terms of HIV and flying to the leader in Europe now. And it's triggered debates, conversations, and reviews across Europe, which wouldn't have happened. And it's been bigger than just HIV. It's gone to any other conditions that were previously preventing people from flying. Those wannabe pilots are going back now saying, wait a minute, we know that this doesn't have to be the case. We don't want or need to take no for an answer. And actually the authorities are willing to have those conversations. So I think it's been a huge step forward, actually. Yeah.
Amazing. I mean, and that is, when you say authorities, are you referring to those in the UK, or is it Europe, or?
It's both actually. So obviously post Brexit, we're back on our own again. But at the time when the campaign happened, all of that had to go through Europe.
Yeah.
So ultimately, that there was a European influence, and what we've done is we've left Europe with a legacy of this is how you can make this happen.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And it actually segues into one of the other questions, which is, okay, that's Europe, and we all know, and we're all very privileged to live here. But have you experienced any sort of rejection from countries? Because of the virus, other countries where it's not legal, or you've had to have your meds, or I think there was a question about just generally, how is it with flying with the virus?
It's a tricky one. I mean, me personally, no, but that's more of a product of where I've been to and where I've been flying over the past couple of years. Obviously, those restrictions still exist, and again, it was in the film. It's a culture of the world where a person either can't live, can't work, or can't even take medication into a country. But actually, there's always a difference between these are the rules versus these are how they are practically applied. And I think for me, it'll just be a case in the future of crossing those bridges pragmatically, if as and when I come to them.
And do you feel like the airline is supportive of those potential barriers that you may face?
Incredibly so. And actually, I can't fault my airline and the people within it for anything from day one to go into that job. And I got that job having not disclosed my status, and that was important to me because I didn't want it to be about that. And of course, because we'd faced that sort of barrier in the first place, I didn't want to add anything else into the mix. But actually, after coming out at work, the support has been universally positive, and it's not just been my airline; it's been through friends and colleagues across airlines in the UK. So it's been brilliant, honestly.
Yeah. And you kind of covered it with the fact that it's things are actually changing now, which is great, and the legacy that you've left in Europe. But is there anything else that needs to be done?
I think the biggest thing is getting to a stage where there are no multi-crew restrictions, and it's making that process quick and easy for anybody living with HIV. And we're almost there, to be honest. So I would say with confidence now, if you are a pilot at any stage of training who is living with HIV, go to your doctor, and they will be able to support you with the authorities through that process of becoming certified and getting the medical you need. All the groundwork's being done. It just needs more people to do it now, essentially.
And I mean, that kind of sums up what one of the last questions that I was going to ask, which is, what advice would you give to a HIV positive person and who wants to start a career pathway to becoming a pilot?
Do it.
Basically,
do it.
do it.
Yeah, I mean, look, COVID and the current world aside, the principle for me still stands. Don't let HIV or any other chronic condition, for that matter, that you can safely fly with, prevent you from pursuing that dream, because we've proven that it can be done.
Yeah, amazing, so good.
Thank you.
And thanks.
I was getting emotional too. Then actually, that's the first time that I've seen that film all the way through.
Really?
Yeah.
You were forced.
Don't cry.
We forced you to watch the whole thing. No, I loved it. I like I said, it was weirdly relatable for someone who's not remotely a pilot. And I just want to thank you for putting, being a pioneer in this, because like it's down to people like you that not just make it HIV okay for people working in the aviation, but you put HIV on a platform which destigmatizes it, which lots of things, my story with in the media, the prevalence of things like it's just in the show and stuff. Just it's all about getting HIV back in the conversation, and you did that, so thank you.
Thank you. Just before I go, just need to say a very huge big thank you to Cameron Nicol, who produced, directed and edited that all together, and to Paul as well. Between the two of them, they've created something quite special.
Yeah, so it was beautiful. Other than extremely well done, it was also lovely to watch. Yeah, thank you. But yeah, you're not gone yet, James. We're going to ask you some questions later on. But in the meantime, we're going to move to our second guest, Florence. So I would just like to introduce Florence Abedei. Did I say it right, Florence? She's nodding. She's politely nodding. Florence was diagnosed 22 years ago, back in 1999. So the world was a very different place then, especially on the HIV front. Florence found out when she went for a routine antenatal testing. She's now studying a degree in social work and is happily married with a 21-year-old son. As well as studying, she's working. She volunteers as a positive voice speaker for Terrence Higgins Trust, and her experiences in schools, sharing her experiences in schools and colleges and workplaces. So over to you, Florence, to tell us a bit about your story.
Thank you very much. As I was introduced, I'm Florence, and I'm going to take you through my story. So I'll take you back to 21 years ago, 1999. I was pregnant, so I went for my normal antenatal testing. When I saw the midwife at the hospital, she said to me, "Florence, would you like to take an HIV test?" I thought, why are you asking me that? I became very defensive. I thought, why are you asking me that? Because of the stigma around HIV, I felt that HIV will not happen to people like me. So I was very defensive. And then she said, "Florence, do you know that if you take HIV medication, if you're positive and you take HIV medication, your child will not be infected because it will lower the virus in the body?" When she said that, I remembered that I watched on BBC News a few weeks before, a month before, where they were encouraging all pregnant women to take an HIV test. Anyway, so I thought about it. I thought, okay, I'll do it. So I did the test. Didn't think anything of it. Went away. 2 weeks later, I got a letter saying, "Oh, can I come back to the antenatal clinic for further tests?" And I thought, oh no, it would be anemia in pregnancy or high blood pressure in pregnancy or diabetes in pregnancy. I didn't even think that it could be HIV. So I got there to the clinic and I sat with all the pregnant women with their big bellies and I was excited. And another woman came to me, not the same midwife, another woman. And she introduced herself as a midwife and she said, "Can you please come with me?" Followed her and she took me into a room. When I got to the room, there was another woman sitting down. And I thought, I still thought nothing of it. So I sat down. And as I sat down, she just said to me, "Florence, your HIV test has come back positive." I started to shake. I was sweating. I became very emotional. I started crying. I didn't know what to do. I was just hot all over. And then she said to me in a nice way, she said, Florence, what do you know about HIV? And I said, I know I'm going to die. Because remember, that was 21 years ago. Medication had only just been introduced. People were still dying of AIDS. And I thought, I'm going to die of AIDS. That's what's going to happen. I'm going to die. And so she said, no, Florence, there is medication now. And then she explained the whole thing about when you take medication, your viral load will be undetectable, and your CD4 count, the soldiers in your body will fight infections, and it will protect you from falling ill. And when she said that, I sort of got hope back. And I thought, oh, so there is hope. Although I was still really scared. And of course, because of the stigma, I thought, oh my God, no one will want to be around me. I'm going to be infectious. Because in those days, there wasn't the understanding of U equals U. So undetectable equals untransmittable. Anyway, she said she will book me an appointment the next day to see a consultant. So I went in and I saw the consultant, and she said the same thing to me about medication. I said, I want to start this medication immediately because I don't want to die. I want to see my child. I knew it was a boy. I want to see my son grow up. And so she gave me prescriptions for medication, and I got my medication. But before I left that appointment, remembering it's the first appointment I had, the good thing that consultant did was ask me if I'd like to meet other people living with HIV. I said yes. So she gave me a number. I went home, I called that number, and this lovely African woman answered on the other line. She introduced herself as Angelina, and it's a support group for women. In those days, it was only women. This organization now supports women and men. So I rang. So I spoke to her, and she said, oh, Florence, don't worry, I've had HIV for 5 years. I thought, what? 5 years and you're still alive? I thought, oh no, I really have to go and meet these people. So I went to the meeting, and I remember when before getting there, I thought I was going to see people that were frail, people that were on wheelchairs, people with crutches, and sick people. I was expecting to see ill people. When I got there, the lady that opened the door to let me in, took me down into the room. And as I got into this room, I saw all these women with, I won't forget the nails. They had long nails done. They had makeup done. They had their hair done. Some were pregnant. Some were married. Some were coming from work. I thought, these people, you would not know if you sit in a bus or in the train with these people, that there are people living with HIV. I was shocked. I couldn't believe this. And one of the women there, I still remember till now, she took me under her wings and she said, Florence, don't worry. She kept on reassuring me, come to the meetings weekly, we're here every week and everything. And there was a creche where my son could go so that we could safely talk about HIV. And people were sharing all their different HIV experiences, a lot of bad experiences that people had. Some people's family members had, one woman, when she was diagnosed, she told her mother said, okay, these are your cutleries, these are your cups, this is your room and you stay in there. So the stigma was very bad. So anyway, I carried on going to the support groups. I now decided to tell people, to tell my partner. I told an ex-partner, he turned around and said to me, if I go and take an HIV test and it comes positive, I'm going to get a gun and I'm going to shoot you. That just shocked me. And then I told the father of my son, that was the last time I saw him. I didn't see him again till today. It's 21 years now. And I told another friend I had known from a long time ago, and he just turned around and said to me, look at you, Florence, look what you've done to yourself. And that was the last time I spoke to him. But since then, this is why I do the volunteering I do with THT. It's helped me build my confidence. And all my ambitions, I'm trying to get them all back again. Because when you're diagnosed with HIV, it hits you so hard that the stigma can suppress you. And if you're not careful, all your dreams will just fade away. So since then, I've been volunteering for THT as a positive speaker. Since then, I applied for university. I have a degree from Nigeria because that's where I grew up, but was not recognized in this country. So anyway, I decided I'll go to university and study social work because I had social workers help me when I was bringing up my son. And then I met my husband who is living with HIV for 30 years now. He was told in the 80s that he was going to die. So he's a miracle, really, to be alive. So we got married in 2012, and my son is 21 now. He's just had finished his degree in film practice. He had a first class. I'm very proud of him. And I told my son when he was 5 years old, because I believe in telling children when they're young so that it's normality as they grow up. And he's just been okay with it, but he comes to me once in a while and asks me a question. He came back to me and said, Mom, but do I have HIV as well? I said, no, you don't. And recently when I've asked him, I said, because he has a girlfriend now, I asked him, I said, how have you told your friends? And said, oh yeah, one day I was drunk, I just told them, and yeah, I tell them. And I said, have you had negative reactions? And he said, yeah, but if he just tells them that you equals you, and they need to understand that, and that way I'm not infectious. Yeah, I'm very privileged to have the opportunity to speak today because yes, HIV has changed my life, but it has changed my life for the better because I've been able to finish my degree, get married. My son is healthy, and I'm happy to give back to the community. Also the university, I disclosed my HIV status to the university, and they've given me so much support, I can't even complain. So my message to everyone is, if you meet anyone living with HIV, please be kind to them. Because if as a collective we can be kind, then stigma will go away. And we need to educate people. Any opportunity you have to talk about HIV, talk about it, talk about you equals you, and try and break the stigma that we all face. Thank you very much.
Wow, thank you, Florence. That's so beautiful. Thank you. And yeah, I know how difficult it is to make that stand and be public about your status. And I mean, you did amazingly to live with HIV in that time, you know, and keep it to yourself, and then to actually then give back and put your face to your story is so powerful, and it's amazing. So again, that's what this campaign's about, and it's yeah, it's great. So I'm like nearly crying, so sorry. Yeah, this next section is just a few more of the questions that have come in, so it's open to all three of us. And the first one is how did you come to terms with your diagnosis? I'm happy to answer it.
Yeah,
Since you two we've kind of covered it. But it's really similar story, to be honest. The same with you both. Like I was it's so weird, Florence, because you were diagnosed in 1999, literally 3 years after antiretrovirals came in, and I was diagnosed in 2012. So like 13 years later, or was it 2011? I can't remember, but it was like a long time after. And yeah, I went through exactly the same emotions. And you know, it's kind of crazy, you know, it's like identifying as a gay man as well, like that the HIV came from, you know, there was so many gay men affected that you'd think, at least as a gay person, I would have some kind of you know, some kind of preparation, but I really didn't know what the virus meant. Really, I thought it was the same as you, Florence. I thought it was a death sentence. And I was 21 when I was diagnosed, and I think I'd just come out the gay closet, like for 1 year, and within that year I was diagnosed. So yeah, it was really hard. I had to educate myself, and that's the wrong thing about this is that you had to speak to that lovely lady who, you know, and if it wasn't for these people that helped us, and you know, I found a lot of help in just, you know, like just researching, and you know, people like Terrence Higgins just are there to help, and you know, I had to go through that process, and I mean, I did, but it was, I guess you just go. The world has changed since I was diagnosed. Like you said, Florence, about U equals U, like that wasn't a thing when I was diagnosed. So you are constantly worried that we're going to pass it on, and then we kind of got told that once you go on medication, you can't pass it on. But on top of that, actually, when I was diagnosed, it wasn't commonplace to go on meds straight away. They wanted to hold you back so that because at the time, some of the meds weren't would have side effects and stuff like that. So they kind of held you off until you really needed it. So you were really contagious, and that is scary. But then since then, we've had things like PrEP, which is even more amazing, and now I think that's. I mean, I'm blabbering now, but that for me, I did come to terms with my status, but it wasn't until just recently that I realized I hadn't fully come to terms with my diagnosis until I spoke out about it. And I don't know about you three, but speaking out about HIV is just it's been incredibly rewarding. I've flipped this negative stigma bubble that surrounds HIV into something that's actually positive and something that I can be proud of, and tell people authentically the experience that I went through, which was difficult. And I think actually doing that has been amazing to sort of heal that kind of part of my life, which was quite difficult. So that's my answer to that question. So maybe there's another one. This is a good one that I'm sure you all have experienced. How was your experience telling partners?
I'll answer that. Is that okay?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, very difficult. When I was dating, before I met my husband, or say going out with my husband, I would meet people, and then it just was so complex, because now you have this HIV status that you need to share with them, before you get intimate. I told a few people, and that was the last time I saw them. They kind of I remember one person in particular I told, and after I told him, we were talking regularly almost every day. After I told him, I didn't hear from him for 2 weeks, and then he just suddenly called, and I said, "Oh, why are you calling? I could have been dead and buried by now." So it's very difficult. But then slowly, as I continued volunteering and building up my confidence, I got to a stage where I told people before, I told, if I met a partner, I would tell the partner, or someone I'm dating, I would tell them, about HIV. And it didn't work for me. We stayed friends, but we didn't have intimate relationships. So I think with U equals U now, I'm married since then. So, but if I wasn't married, and with U equals U now, I'll be very confident, and I will tell people as when I meet them, when I start dating them, but I'll educate them as well, because that's very important. Because if you just tell someone, "Oh, I'm HIV positive," and leave them like that, it's not good. You need to educate them, because they don't know the facts.
And when Florence, when would you tell them as well? That's always something that everyone asks me. There's like that kind of sweet spot of telling someone that you're positive. Like, do you tell them on the first date, or do you?
I think after a few dates, before you get intimate, because with U equals U, you can pass it on. So if they don't stay with you, even with that information, then they don't really love you.
Agree. It's a filter, isn't it? I always say.
Yeah, huge. I always say it's a huge litmus test.
Yeah, exactly. So I'll do another one. What would you say to a friend, family member, or partner, someone newly diagnosed with HIV?
I would say that give it time. And there's two big learnings for me that I've kind of realized over the years. And the first one is that it is going to be a shock, but try and think of it as a shock in that it's a diagnosis like any other. And and I certainly now try and disassociate the stigma part of living with HIV from actually, okay, it's a chronic condition, and
100%.
give yourself a break that it's going to take some time to adjust to having a chronic condition. And that's the first thing. And then the second thing, and it kind of ties into what Florence was saying about disclosures there, it's the biggest change for me was I started to think of disclosures in terms of how a person reacts should never be taken as a judgment on you, but more as a reflection of them, their values, their experience, and their understanding about HIV.
Their education, yeah.
Absolutely. And then you can decide, or together you can decide whether you want to go on that journey, like Florence says, of educating people about it. And if somebody chooses not to go on that journey, that's totally fine. And you can allow them to walk away and not take that to heart, really. And so that would be the two things I would say to anyone that was newly diagnosed.
Yeah, and so you touched on it, and there is another question, so I'll ask you, James, just because it links. What is your experience of stigma, and how did it affect you, and how did you overcome it? Apart from obviously not being able to, I think more in your personal life, maybe, because we've talked about your professional.
Yeah. So in my personal life, I think the biggest, the thing that I did the most and that I've experienced is self-stigma and the internalized stigma that I would potentially in the early days avoid social situations, avoid relationships, because I wasn't on treatment, so I felt like I was just kind of, an exploded bomb or walking grenade. And two, I would make a judgment and think, okay, you know what? They're not going to get it. This person won't get it. Therefore, I would shut down and walk away. And probably as a bit of a self-defense mechanism, because I can deal with my own sort of internal monologue as to how that's going to feel, as to what they might say, rather than run the gauntlet and run the risk of what they will actually do. And that kind of played out for me in various scenarios. Again, similar to Florence's story of meeting somebody and everything going great, you disclose and they walk away, versus another one for me, which was having that conversation, it all being fine, but then a few days or a few weeks later, it absolutely not being fine at all. So yeah, it's that was a tough one for me. It was a self stigma more than anything else. And again, based on what you said earlier, Luke, about internal prejudice and internal homophobia, and that's why it's so important for me now to disassociate. This is the chronic condition that you're living with, and this is all the stigma over here, and they're very different.
100%. And yeah, like I think there is so much, because of all those adverts that you showed in your video, like there's a lot of stigma attached with, HIV is really attached to homophobia and that and racism, and I think it's really hard not to link the two when you're actually in that situation. So it can make that situation that you're already in even worse. I know for me, coming to terms with my sexuality was really difficult, and then being diagnosed with HIV, it was like the icing on the cake. It was like, oh, you deserve it, blah blah blah, and this is a mental torture that I did to myself.
And something that Florence alluded to earlier as well was that the bit after diagnosis, that sort of paralysis that you feel and think, do you know what, actually life has just stopped and I'm not sure now how I can navigate any of it. It's kind of, it's that was the biggest challenge for me, I think, in that moment, and then obviously finding a way through that. But yeah, it's funny how I think what has changed, and obviously we're all diagnosed at different times, is that the journey and the thought processes and the emotions are all the same.
Yeah.
What's changed is that the support, I guess there's better, so there's more support now, and going through that journey potentially can be a little bit quicker and a little less painful than it might have been 20 years ago, but it certainly still exists. Because part of me felt guilty actually for sometimes thinking, actually, I don't have a right to feel this way because it's not as bad now as it was.
100%. They call it survivor's guilt, and I felt that as well. And like, why do I have the right to be upset about this because I'm healthy and I'm alive? But I think it's really important to acknowledge that there is a lot of stigma and it still exists. And that's why My Life Changed campaign is great, because it's putting faces to names. It's putting faces to stories, and positive stories that empower people to not just, it's not just a leaflet, it's like real people saying that, like, I'm fine. And it's also, like, it's hopefully a beacon of light for people who are newly diagnosed. There's another question. I mean, I think we all covered it, but is there anything you wish you knew when you were first diagnosed? There's a lot of things.
Yeah. Good question. I think for me, I wish that I had potentially engaged with and educated myself before that, and educated myself as a matter of course, and it not having to come to a point of the education being a necessity. But I think that's more to do with the way in which there is a lack of public awareness and the lack of a public appetite to make sure that HIV is high on the agenda from school age onwards, and the lack of that in itself, for me, and this is only my opinion, the lack of that in itself for me is then what breeds the culture, particularly within the gay community, or at least the gay community that I was associating with, in which HIV was either not spoken about at all, or it was somebody else's kind of dark secret over here. And because of that, we never spoke about it. Therefore, you don't have a chance to normalize it, nor to understand what it really means to live with the virus. And that, for me, would have made that diagnosis a hell of a lot easier, I think.
100%. It's like it's a systemic issue, which kind of never, the media never did a follow-up story after all those horrible adverts that they put out in the 80s. They never really made a huge effort and to actually explain that, destigmatize really. And yeah, that's thanks to these campaigns like this and individuals like you guys and me.
Yeah,
I'm very proud of speaking out and the reactions that I've had. It's one of the most rewarding things ever, just to listen to people and seeing how people have been empowered by it. And just even the other day, a colleague rang me. I thought he was going to talk to me about work, and I was like, oh, what's he going to say? And actually, he was like, it's actually personal. I met a guy who I really like, and he told me 2 weeks or 3 weeks into the dating process that he was positive, and he told me, like, if I hadn't been following your story, I would not have had the reaction that I did. And it's like real life reminders that make me want to talk about it even more. And and I'm very honored to be here. I think.
Can I just add very quickly? I think what THT is doing is fantastic. I think the positive voices is fantastic as well. The fact that we're going to schools and talk to school children, because they're the generation that are going to become adults. So if we educate all the children, they can go and educate their parents. Parents can educate friends. That way we'll break the stigma. And then we need to work with the media a bit more so they can do more films like It's a Sin, because that was a really good eye-opener. But we need more of that.
Yeah, definitely. Exactly, and that's why we're all on the side of the bus right now. So we are we're definitely moving in the right direction. But I think I'm not sure if there's any more. Richard's got his hand up. We maybe have one more question from Richard.
Thank you everyone for speaking to us this evening. I think everyone in the chat is so inspired by all three of you telling your stories and inspiring others to clearly tell their stories. And that's been really brilliant. There was a couple of questions that I wanted to make sure got asked. There's one very practical one for you, James. How does it work with your meds when you're working sometimes in different time zones? And then there's a question for all of you, which is, why do you do talks like this, and what motivates you to go out and tell your story? Thank you.
Okay, so for me, I try and make sure that I time my meds to a time where either it's before work or afterwards, and I kind of, if I know that there is going to be a period of time in a month or a month and a half where that might not work, I'll just take my meds with me, and I'll take them during the flight at whatever point in time that might be. And everybody at work is totally sort of supportive of that, knows what I'm doing, and yeah. So
do you have to set an alarm if you're going around weird times?
Do you know what's quite funny? That one of my alarms went off a few weeks back. I was literally in the last 1,000 feet, and the weather was awful. And then the captain's like, "What on earth is that?" And yeah, it was my alarm. So sorry, my bad. But yeah, so I'll set an alarm, and I'll try. Yeah, that was a mistake, but I'll just try and do it that way. That's the way for me, and I try not to let it impact so far as possible.
And yeah, Richard's second part of the question.
The second part, it is. I think we've kind of covered it, to be honest. It is because it on a personal level, it gives me so much energy, and actually, it makes me feel better about the diagnosis. The more it normalizes it for me, actually. But on a wider level than that, if we can reach one other person, and on the back of tonight, one of the participants goes and has a conversation with somebody new that didn't know anything about HIV, and from that, somebody then has a dating experience in which they feel differently after today than they did before, then that's what makes it worth it. And if anybody can go through this process and go through diagnoses and get to the stages that we are at now quicker, then that's worth it for me, and that's why I do it.
Yeah.
What motivates me is, I said it before, seeing when I speak to children, the way they just go quiet and look, and they're shocked. There was a school I went to, a private school, and they all lined up to shake my hands. I thought that was really nice.
Wow.
Yeah. So they are the young generation. They're the ones that are going to grow up with the message. You equals you motivates me. The fact that ever since that was officially out, that if you're taking medication and your viral load is undetectable, you're not infectious, that motivates me. That gives me the confidence. And that's why I tell people when I get to a stage where I think I need to tell people I'm open about my HIV status. Also, like James said, it helps me as well. It helps build my confidence as well. So yeah, just educating people so the stigma can be reduced. We still have the whole of the stigma is really bad in Africa. So we still have the rest of the world to educate. And also the fact that I know that people in Africa sometimes don't have medication and people are still dying. We need to just keep talking to the government to get them to support all those countries so that people can get free medication, free healthcare treatment for their HIV. Yeah, so all those things motivate me.
Yeah, I completely agree with everything. And I think so. I live in London. I think sometimes we live in a bit of a bubble. I mean, I'm not from London and I wasn't diagnosed in London, so I know what it's a bit like to be diagnosed outside. And I think it's important to remember that, you know, it isn't, we're not there yet. So until we are, then I think people, that's what motivates me to keep talking. And then hopefully people won't have to. It'll just be another thing like diabetes or whatever. But I do think we're at time, and I don't want to keep it going. But yeah, thank you to both of you guys, and thanks to Terrence Higgins for hosting this event. If we didn't get to cover your question, please, I'm sorry that we didn't have time, but if you can just, you can always contact Terrence Higgins over Instagram, or they're going to put the email in this chat. If you want to see more campaigns like this, please support Terrence Higgins Trust. There's always opportunities to donate on the website. And any questions, just ask any of us. I'm on Instagram. If they can put my Instagram in the chat as well. Yeah, I can't speak for James and Florence, but
yeah, why not?
Thank you so much, everybody. I think that's it.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Florence, and thanks, Luke.